Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to What Corruption Should You Buy for Melee DPS. So I'm going to go through all the Melee DPS specs and talk about which corruptions you should buy for them from the vendor. I already have one of these videos for tanks and I intend to do Ranged DPS and then Healers in the next couple days before it's all too obsolete. So let's get started by talking about what you can see here on this spreadsheet. Some of you may be just here to screenshot this and then get out of here, in which case, okay. But if you have any questions about why these things are in the columns they're in, I'll explain all that if you keep watching the video. So I've got the general use kind of good corruptions for most or all cases. I'll explain where some are better than others in cases where there are, but for the most part, there's usually one kind of set that you can use for both Raid and Mythic Plus for DPS. So I will explain though when stuff diverges from that. Then I've got a column called Is Infinite Stars Worth When It's Good? Infinite Stars is pretty good on fights like Shadhar Mythic and in those kind of pure single target environments. And for some specs, it's worth using in that case. For some specs, they just have a stat corruption of some kind that's way better, so it's not even worth ever picking this up. And then for some specs, Infinite Stars is so good that it's worth using even in more cases than the ideal. So I'll explain all that. Then I'll explain whether or not Twilight Devastation is worth wearing in Mythic Plus. And then finally, I've got some other useful corruptions here, which are things that you may be interested in, but you probably don't need to pick up unless you want to use those situations. So let's get started with Frost Death Knight. Frost Death Knight has two major builds, Breath of Sindragosa and Ice Cap. Both of them are pretty similar. Both can use Severe. Ice Cap also can make good use out of Expedient, whereas Breath of Sindragosa would be a little bit more mastery-oriented, so Masterful and maybe even a Honed Mind can go in there as well. Generally, for all the classes that are on this spreadsheet, you should wait until the rank 3 of your corruption is available before buying a bunch of it. That's because it is more efficient in terms of echoes to corruption to buy the later pieces, or the rank 3s rather than the rank 2s and the rank 1s generally. And also it's more efficient in terms of you're not going to run out of slots as quickly on your character. If you buy, all masterful ones, very quickly you're going to have all your pieces being corrupted, and then you're going to be looking, and the only way for you to upgrade is now to buy a masterful 2 or a masterful 3, and you're only getting a tiny bit of benefit from that for the full price. So for most cases, unless you have a short-term need like progression right now, you should usually wait and buy the rank 3s of whatever corruption is good for you. All right, let's move on to Unholy Death Knight. Unholy Death Knight, generally you're looking for Expedients, maybe a spot in there for a Racing Pulse as well, but generally stacking Expedient is the go-to for this spec. This is a spec that can make good use out of Infinite Stars, whereas Frost, a little bit more medium. Generally stats are probably the best move for Frost once you can stack all of them. Unholy can play Twilight Devastation in Mythic Plus, but I think that staying with Expedients and maybe even going to a little bit of Masterful in big AoE cases can be a better call than the Twilight Dev. Twilight Dev, one of the reasons that you'll see a lot of Unholy Death Knights using Twilight Dev right now is because there's that two-handed weapon off of N'Zoth that gives you a guaranteed Twilight Dev 3. But I expect that with this corruption vendor, we're going to start seeing that drop down and more Unholy Death Knights just stacking stats all the way up and down their budget. Okay, up next we've got Havoc Demon Hunter. Havoc Demon Hunter is a bit of an interesting spec. It interacts with corruptions pretty differently than a lot of the others do because it has such a high amount of natural haste just from the Furious Gaze traits that are its best in slot trait. One of the best corruptions for this spec in just almost all cases is the Lash of the Void corruption, which is from Raw Den Mythic weapons, but I put those in italics here because you can't actually buy those from the vendor. Expedient, Ineffable Truth, and actually Versatile and Strike Through are all kind of in this mix of pretty close all-purpose corruptions that you may want to build a kit that includes some amount of each of those. But generally with Havoc Demon Hunter, you actually want to play either Infinite Stars when Infinite Stars is good, so single target, and even some raid fights where Infinite Stars isn't that good for basically anybody else. Because of that huge amount of haste you're getting, you just get a lot more procs of this thing than everybody else, so it can be valuable even on fights like, Xanash, where there's 2 targets a lot of the time on Mythic, and that makes the trait not as good for a lot of the other specs. For Havoc, it ends up actually still being pretty good in that case. And similarly, in places where Infinite Stars is bad, Twilight Devastation becomes good. So the general kit for Havoc Demon Hunter in Mythic Plus is you got your Raw Den weapons if you have those, just put those on for 50 of your corruption budget, and then fill the rest of your budget up with Twilight Devastation, and then use the final however many points get you below either 40, or usually you can go below 60 on Havoc and be fine, and fill that up with expedient or ineffable, or maybe versatile or strike through. But I would usually I think it's going to be expedient or ineffable that will be best for you. All right, up next is Feral Druid. Feral Druid also has a good weapon from Ny'alotha, the Devour Vitality Staff off of Mott. For the other corruptions, you're generally just going to want to be stacking crit and crit damage, so severe and strike through. Not 100% sure what the best ratio of that is going to be. This is also a spec that can benefit from Twisted Appendage, not really scaling all that hard with Infinite Stars. And you can maybe use Twilight Devastation, but I think it's probably, at the end of the day, we're probably going to start seeing endgame builds, mostly just stats and not playing the Twilight Devastation here. Retribution Paladins, a lot of stats for them are pretty close. The build that I expect will end up being the more common one, now that you have access to this vendor, is going to be stacking Masterful with the combination with the Avenging Might trait. But there is potential for stacking Severe with the Expurgation build, or just like having a mix of random stats of various kinds. Ineffable Truth, also an interesting thing that may be good, particularly in like a Mythic Plus setting. Reducing the cooldown of Wings, pretty valuable thing given how powerful Wings is. So some amount of Ineffable, even up to maybe stacking it, might be good for this spec. I'm not 100% sure. This is also a spec that can definitely make good use of Infinite Stars and maybe even Twilight Devastation in the cases where they'll be good. Up next is Windwalker Monk. This is a spec that got probably one of the hardest hit by the Gushing Wound nerf, because Gushing Wound was probably going to be the corruption that they were just going to be stacking for most cases. Now it looks like, Raw Den weapons aside, they kind of don't have any good corruption. It might be a versatile stack, it might be a Twisted Appendage stack. In Mythic Plus, you can probably just play the Twilight Devastation and be okay with that. But I think it might actually still be Gushing Wound or Twisted Appendage that you're supposed to stack here. And it might even still be Gushing Wound post-nerf. Of course, for those of you who don't know, in the next couple days, Gushing Wound is getting a 35% nerf. Otherwise, a lot more specs would be using it over stuff like Infinite Stars in single target situations. But Windwalker, because of the stats that they have, ends up looking like Gushing Wound might even still be good for them. Arms Warrior is another spec that likes to stack Expedient, just all Expedient all the way down, with maybe room for an Ineffable Truth 1, probably room for an Ineffable Truth 1. Don't play Infinite Stars, don't play Twilight Devastation, they're not as good as Expedients. Fury Warrior is something that is looking for Severe, so the crit corruption. You can also play Infinite Stars on this spec, and you can maybe play Twilight Devastation on it as well. A lot of people are using Twilight Devastation right now, but again, there's a good two-hander from N'Zoth that comes with that baseline. I kind of expect to see that just kind of go away and be mostly Severes in Mythic Plus going forward, so once Severe actually shows up on the vendor. Survival Hunter is an expedient stacking spec, so just go with all of those. You can make good use out of Infinite Stars on single target. You can play Twilight Devastation, but Expedience is going to be better. There may also be room for a Racing Pulse in here, especially once you have enough Expedience to make that Racing Pulse even better. For Assassination Rogue, on single target, generally it's going to be Expedient that you're stacking. In AoE, Haste loses value, and if you're playing the Echoing Blades, Azurite trait, that scales pretty hard with crit. So stacking Severe may instead be the move in that case. Assassination Rogue also can get pretty good value out of Twisted Appendage, so you can play that. And you can play Twilight Devastation, people do right now, but I expect to see that mostly go away and be replaced with a bunch of Severes, maybe a Strike Through or something, as the patch goes on and we get access to whatever we want from the Corruption vendor. Subtlety Rogue is up next. I'm going to be honest, there's not a huge amount of theory crafting that I've been able to find about what's good for Subtlety Rogue. Severe looks like the main corruption that people are stacking right now. However, I think that you could also maybe make a build that focuses on some Masterful to try and do priority damage, if that's what you're going for with Subtlety Rogue. That is still a niche of the spec, and if you're trying to optimize for that, it can be good. Masterful also not a bad AoE stat if you're playing the Secret Technique talent. So all in all, there's some room here. Maybe there's something I'm missing with Subtlety. Not something that a huge amount of research has been done with. Looks like Gushing Wound, even post-nerf, might still be a good single-target corruption for them. And it looks like you can play Twilight Devastation on this spec, although, again, I'm not sure if it's going to be better or worse than just stacking the Severes. My guess is probably the Severes are going to be better, but not 100% sure on that. Subtlety can also play Lash the Void and Diver's Folly weapons, which are maybe worth considering for that spec. Lash the Void in particular is something you can wear on this spec, and you do lose a little bit of value from that, but it might be good, so... again, more research required from either of the Subtlety Rogues that are out there. Outlaw Rogue, up next. This one is one where stacking Lash of the Void, or wearing the Lash of the Void weapons from Raw Den is just great all-around corruption. And then you kind of want to go in a single target situation. You can go with Twisted Appendage or Gushing Wound maybe still. In a Mythic Plus situation, like Havoc Demon Hunter, you just want to stack all the Twilight Devastation you can. And then you can fill the last bit. Usually I think with the Strike Through is going to be best for you, but it might be something like a Severe as well. So you can look into that and see what is going to look better based on your stats. Finally, Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shaman is an expedient stacking class. Do want to wear those Lash the Voids if you can get them off of Raw Den. You can also use Infinite Stars where it's going to be good, and you can play Twilight Devastation. Both of them are going to have a fairly high proc rate, although I kind of suspect that, again, Twilight Devastation, even though it'll be good, might end up being eclipsed by Expedient once you have all the Expedients you want. So that's something to test out and see what does better for you. If in doubt, just buying Expedient 3 the next time it shows up on the vendor, probably going to be your best bet on Enhancement Shaman. Anyways, that's my notes here for all these specs. I'm gonna try and put this I'm gonna try and maybe make this spreadsheet look a little nicer and then upload it as well, so you guys can just refer to it instead of coming back to this video or saving a screenshot. Although, if you do want to keep coming back to this video and watching the ad again, I'd appreciate that as well. If this video did help you out, remember to like and subscribe and tell all your friends about it, and check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Dratnos, and in the next couple days, I will have Ranged DPS and Healers out for you. If there's anything that I got wrong or any builds that I've missed, put them in the comments below. Definitely not 100% sure that I've gotten everything here, but I tried my best to get as much as I can, and I actually do have quite a bit of knowledge of quite a few of these specs, so for the most part, I'm pretty confident on this video in particular that a lot of this stuff is going to be right. That being said, check the comments and see if there's some high thumbs up to comment about how stupid I am about one of these specs. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one.